Hello class, and welcome to my presentation about CSS specificity and redundancy. Okay, so CSS specificity is a set of rules that determines which styles should be applied to an element when multiple CSS rules target that same element and conflict with each other. It is a way to resolve conflicts and determine the final style that should be used. So, here I have an HTML file with some elements and CSS selectors. Every CSS selector has a specificity value, which is calculated based on the combination of selector used. Specificity values are typically represented by a 4-part number, where each part represents the specificity of a different component. So in this website, we get the specificity calculator. So for example, I can type H1 selector, and you can see that it will get a 1 point. It will get 1 point. Also, I can type, for example, I'm gonna type class attribute with header value, and as you can see, we'll get 10 points. The higher the specificity value of a selector, the more weight it carries in determining the final style. Here's a breakdown of the specificity hierarchy. So there are 4 points, and I'm gonna start from the highest to the lowest. So the first one says, inline style have a highest specificity value. They are applied directly to an element using the style attribute. So in my HTML file, in the H1 element, I already typed the style attribute with a value of green. So since that one is the highest specificity value, it's gonna be the one that will be displayed on the screen. So as you can see here in this example, the H1 CSS specificity and redundancy is in green. And it doesn't matter the selector that I have here. So as you can see here, I have the H1 selector, and also I got the color property with blue value, and it is not displayed on the screen because the style, the inline style, have the highest specificity value, so it's the most important one in this declaration. Number 2 says, IDs have a higher specificity value than classes, attributes, and pseudo-classes. An ID selector is denoted by a hash symbol, followed by the ID name. Okay, so I don't need, for now, the style attribute, so I'm going to delete it. And so the second one is the IDs. So let's type an ID declaration with a name of header 1. So so again, we have the H1 selector with a value of blue color. So I'm gonna save the change, and you will see that it got back to the blue color because we don't have the inline style anymore. So the second one is the one that will get higher in this case. But if I just type the ID, so we get the header, header 1, and also I'm gonna give it a property color with a value of, let's see, black. So I'm gonna save the change, and as you can see, the ID is more important than the H1 selector. For that reason, the color black is gonna be displayed on the screen. Okay, so number 3 says classes, attributes, and pseudoclasses have the same specificity value. They are represented by a period for classes, square brackets for attributes, or a colon for pseudoclasses. So I'm going to declare a class here. So I'm going to delete this one. So let's type class, and I'm going to give it a value of, let's see, header. I'm gonna save the change. It's going back to blue because we don't have the header 1 ID anymore, so that one is not displayed. And let's go back and type a class name header, and I'm gonna give it a value. Let's see. Let's say green. And as you can see, it changed just because the class is more important than the element, the H1. So again, the class is higher in specificity value than the element. Okay, so number 4 says element types have the lowest specificity value. The target all elements of a particular type and are represented by the element name. So for example, we had div, p, paragraph, and a. So again, as you can see, the H1 selector is gonna be the lowest specificity value. For that reason, the color blue is not gonna be displayed on the screen. But let's review what we have learned. So we know that classes are the third point. So let's go back and let's go for previous selectors. Let's go back to IDs. So I'm gonna type ID and and let's give it a value of header 1. And let's see what happened. So it should be black again. So let's see if it's true. Well, so this case the ID is more important than classes. But let's go back again and let's go for the inline style. So let's type style and let's give it the color property, and let's say brown value. Oh, yeah, that's right. And let's save the change. It should go back to brown. Any change. So when two or more conflicting CSS rules apply to the same element, the rule with the higher specificity value takes precedence. If multiple rules have the same specificity, the order of appearance in the CSS file determines which one is applied. So finally, we are going to review the CSS redundancy. So CSS redundancy can have a few negative implications. So 1. Increased file. Redundant CSS rules contribute to larger file sizes, which can impact website loading times. This is particularly important for users with slower internet connections or browsing on mobile devices. Number 2 says maintenance difficulties. Redundant code makes it hard to maintain and update CSS files. When changes need to be made, developers may need to modify multiple instances of the same code, increasing the chances of introducing errors or inconsistencies. And 3. Performance impact. While modern web browsers are efficient at rendering CSS, redundant code can still affect performance, especially when dealing with complex style sheets. The browser needs to process and apply necessary rules, potentially impacting rendering speed. And also, we can talk about how to minimize the CSS redundancy. It's important to follow best practices such as 1. Consolidating duplicate styles. Review the CSS file to identify and consolidate redundant code blocks that have identical properties and values. By combining them into a single rule, you can eliminate redundancy. 2. Utilizing inheritance and cascading. CSS property cascade, meaning that style defined for parent elements can be inherited by their children. Leverage the feature to reduce the need for redundant declarations. 3. Using classes and selectors effectively. Ensure that classes and selectors are used efficiently to target specific elements. Avoid unnecessarily specific overlay bracket selectors that may result in redundant code. And 4. Modular CSS approaches. Adapting modular CSS methodologies such as BAM, Black Element Modifier, or Scalable and Modular Architecture for CSS can help minimize redundancy by promoting a modular and reusable code structure. So, simple words, I can say that we have some selectors here that are not necessary. So I don't need them, so I'm going to comment them out just because the inline style should be the most important one here.